For 130 years, humanity kept its head down. They smiled when they were told to smile. They bowed when they were told to bow. They accepted every insult, every restriction, every humiliation the Galactic Concord threw at them. And they did it with the kind of patience that made other species uncomfortable if they thought about it too long. But nobody thought about it too long. Nobody thought about humans at all. Earth had joined the Concord in the year 2259, not because it wanted to, but because it had no choice. A Veshan patrol fleet had stumbled upon the Sol system during a routine expansion survey, and within 6 months, humanity was given 2 options. Join the Concord as a Tier 9 civilization, the lowest possible rank, or be classified as a wild species and have their planet managed by the Dominion. The word managed was a polite way of saying enslaved, so Earth joined, and Earth smiled. Tier 9 meant everything bad. It meant trade restrictions that kept humans dependent on alien imports. It meant military caps that limited Earth's fleet to 40 small frigates, barely enough to patrol their own system. It meant technology embargoes that blocked access to advanced energy systems, medical tools, and communication arrays that every other species took for granted. It meant inspections. The inspections were the worst part. Every 2 years, Veshan officers would land on Earth, walk through cities, enter laboratories, open doors that were none of their business, and write reports that always said the same thing. Humans were primitive, emotional, and needed continued supervision. Admiral Bei Jinu had lived through 31 of those inspections. He was 78 years old now, a thin man with white hair and scars on his hands from a factory explosion when he was 19. He had spent his entire adult life in the United Earth Navy, climbing from a maintenance worker on a cargo shuttle to the highest rank a human could hold. He never raised his voice. He never lost his temper in public. But everyone who knew him well could see something behind his eyes, something cold and heavy, like a stone sitting at the bottom of a deep river. He stood now in the command room of the UEN headquarters in Geneva, watching a live feed from the Galactic Concord's council chamber, 3,000 light-years away. On the screen, a woman was speaking. Kosuji was 52 years old, tall with short black hair and a face that gave away nothing. She had been Earth's diplomatic envoy to the Concord for 9 years, and in that time she had filed over 400 formal petitions for upgraded status, fair trade terms, and an end to the inspections. 400 petitions, every single one denied. Today was supposed to be different. Today, she had been granted a rare audience with the full council, all 42 species represented, to make Earth's case one final time. She had prepared for months. Her speech was precise, respectful, and backed by data that proved humanity had met every requirement for Tier 5 status 3 times over. She stood at the center of the great circular chamber, surrounded by towering seats filled with beings of every shape and color. Some had scales, some had feathers, some were made of light. All of them looked down at her like she was a small animal that had wandered into the wrong room. Suji spoke for 11 minutes. She laid out the facts calmly. She showed the trade numbers, the compliance records, the 0 violations over 130 years. She did not beg. She did not raise her voice. She simply presented the truth and asked for fairness. Then High Arbiter Moloch, the leader of the Concord, a massive creature with gray skin and 6 eyes arranged in a crown around his skull, leaned forward in his seat. He looked at Suji the way someone might look at a child who had just asked to drive a starship. He said one word. No. The chamber laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to fill the room with a sound that carried across 3,000 light-years and landed in the command room in Geneva like a slap. Jinu watched. His face did not change. He had expected this. He had expected this for 30 years. Suji did not react. She stood perfectly still for 3 seconds, then bowed exactly 15 degrees, the minimum required by Concord Protocol, and walked out. She did not look back. It took her 4 days to return to Earth by transit gate. When she arrived, she went straight to Geneva. She walked into the command room, where Genu was waiting, still standing in the same spot, as if he had not moved since she left. She looked at him. He looked at her. "They will never see us as anything," she said. Genu nodded. It was a small nod, barely visible, but it carried the weight of a century. "I know," he said. That night, a coded signal was sent from Geneva to a facility buried 3 kilometers beneath the floor of the Pacific Ocean. The facility had no official name. In the few documents that referenced it, it was called only Door. It had been built 60 years ago, funded through channels so secret that even most of Earth's government did not know it existed. Only 7 people alive knew what was inside. Yoon Nari was one of them. She was 46, a physicist who had spent her entire career in facilities that did not exist, working on projects that had no names. She had not seen sunlight in 3 years. When the signal arrived on her screen, she read it twice. Then she closed her eyes and took a long, slow breath. She had always known this day would come. Every human who worked in Door knew. They had built everything inside this facility not out of ambition or greed, but out of a fear so deep it had become part of their bones. The fear of a species that had looked up at the stars and understood with perfect clarity that the universe did not care about them, that no one was coming to help, that the only safety that existed was the safety you built with your own hands, in the dark, where no one could see. Nari opened a drawer. Inside was a black folder with a red stripe. She placed it on her desk and stared at it. Somewhere above her, on the surface of a world that had just been told it would never matter, 7 billion people went to sleep. They did not know what was beneath the ocean. They did not know what was coming. But the ocean knew, and it kept the secret, the way it always had. 3 months passed after Suji's return, and on the surface, nothing changed. Earth kept trading. Earth kept complying. Earth kept smiling. The 40 frigates still patrolled the system in their slow, predictable orbits. The inspection schedules were followed without complaint. To anyone watching from outside, humanity looked exactly the same as it always had. Quiet, obedient, small. But the Concorde was watching more carefully now. Something about the silence bothered them. It was too clean, too perfect. After Suji's petition had been denied, the Concorde's intelligence agencies expected some kind of reaction. A protest, a public statement, an angry broadcast, something. Humans were emotional creatures. Everyone knew that. But there was nothing. Just silence. And silence from a species known for being loud was, to certain members of the Concorde, more alarming than any weapon. High Arbiter Malik did not lose sleep over it. They came to him with reports. Encrypted signals detected between Earth's moon bases. Unusual energy readings from Europa. Minor shipping irregularities in the outer solar system. None of it was proof of anything. All of it together was enough to make them nervous. Malik listened. Then he made a decision that he believed was wise and measured. He called it a preventive correction. The rest of the galaxy would later call it the greatest mistake in 10,000 years of recorded history. He authorized the Veshan Dominion to send a punishment fleet to the Sol system. 300 warships. The mission was simple. Destroy Earth's orbital infrastructure, disable their pathetic little fleet, and install a Concorde governor on the surface. Not genocide, just discipline. The kind of lesson the Concorde had delivered to dozens of species before. The small ones always broke. The Veshan fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system on a Tuesday morning, Earth time. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls dark and angular, like a swarm of iron teeth. The fleet commander, a Veshan officer named Grohal, opened a single broadband channel aimed at Earth and spoke 3 words: disarm, submit, kneel. Admiral Bei Jinu was on the bridge of the UEN carrier called the Vigil. He heard the message. Every human in the system heard it. Jinu did not respond. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it. His hands were perfectly steady. Grohal waited 60 seconds. Then he gave the order. The Veshan fleet opened fire on everything in orbit. Earth's 40 frigates, the ones the galaxy had always seen, the ones that were slow and old and barely armed, tried to fight back. They lasted 11 minutes. Orbital stations were torn apart. Communication satellites burst into clouds of metal and glass. The sky above Earth filled with falling debris, bright streaks of fire cutting through the atmosphere like burning fingers. Then the fleet turned its weapons on the surface. Shield domes activated over the major cities, massive energy barriers that could deflect most orbital bombardment. Most, but not all. Seoul took a direct hit that broke through the eastern shield wall. The blast leveled 12 city blocks in 4 seconds. Lagos lost its power grid when a Veshan precision strike hit the central reactor. Sao Paulo's shield held, but the shockwaves from near misses collapsed buildings across the outer districts. In total, the bombardment lasted 47 minutes. When it was over, 3 million humans were dead. 3 million people who had been eating breakfast, going to work, taking their children to school. Gone. The Concorde broadcast the attack on open channels, the way it always did, with corrections. It was meant to be a lesson for every species in every system. This is what happens when you forget your place. Dozens of species tuned in. Some of them cheered. The Veshan homeworld held public viewings. Some species were indifferent, changing the channel the way someone might skip past a news story about a distant earthquake. A few felt uneasy. A few looked at the burning cities and the floating wreckage and thought, very quietly, that this felt wrong. But none of them said anything. In the Concorde, saying something meant becoming the next target. Grohal sent his report to High Arbiter Malik. Correction complete. Humanity is broken, awaiting further orders. 3,000 light-years away, in a small room on a space station orbiting a Concorde trade world, a woman named Imhana sat alone in the dark. She had been living under a false identity in Concorde space for 11 years, working as a translator for a Veshan shipping company. Nobody knew she was human. Nobody knew she was military intelligence. Nobody knew that for 11 years she had been mapping every Concorde military base, every supply route, every command frequency, every weakness in the largest galactic government ever built. She intercepted Grohal's message on a hidden receiver built into her dental implant. She read the words, "Correction complete. Humanity is broken." She sat very still for a long time. Then she whispered to herself, so quietly that even the walls could not hear her. "No, you just woke them up." Far away, past the orbits of Neptune and Pluto, past the scattered ice of the Kuiper Belt, a ship sat inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The asteroid looked dead. It had looked dead for 40 years. Inside the UEN carrier, the Vigil, was fully powered, fully armed, and fully crewed. Captain Han Do-yu stood on the bridge. He was 44, with a calm face and dark eyes that never seemed to blink at the right times. His crew said he was the kind of man who could watch a star explode and ask for a cup of tea. He had watched the attack on Earth in real time. He had watched Seoul burn. He had watched 3 million people die. His face had not changed. Now he reached beneath his command console and pulled out a sealed black case. He opened it. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a single red key. On the key, in small white letters, was one word: door. Do-yu held it up. The bridge crew stared at it. Some of them had trained for this moment for 20 years. Some of them had prayed it would never come. Then he looked at his crew. It came, he said simply. And somewhere beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a facility that the galaxy did not know existed, Yunari felt the signal arrive before she even saw it on her screen. She felt it the way a person feels a storm coming, in the bones, in the teeth, in the space behind the eyes, where fear lives. She opened the black folder with the red stripe. Inside was a single page with a single sentence. It read, "If you are reading this, then they struck first. Open the door." Nari stood up. She walked to the main console, and she began to type. 72 hours after the attack, Earth went dark. Every signal stopped. Every satellite went silent. Every frequency that had carried human voices for over a century suddenly carried nothing. The Sol system, which had been noisy and cluttered with transmissions like every inhabited system in the galaxy, became as quiet as a dead star. Grohal noticed it from his command ship in Earth orbit. He checked his instruments twice. Then he shrugged. This was normal, he told himself. Broken civilizations went quiet. They had seen it before with other species. First came the shock, then the silence, then the surrender. He sent a short message to High Arbiter Malik. Humans have gone silent. Expect formal surrender within days. He was wrong about everything. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, Yunari had not slept in 3 days. The facility called Door was fully active now, its corridors bright with white light and humming with a sound that was not quite a sound, but more like a vibration you could feel in your chest. 60 scientists and engineers moved through the halls with the focused calm of people who had rehearsed for this moment their entire careers. Door was not a weapon. It was a doctrine. The full name, known only to those who worked inside, was the Doctrine of Orchestrated Overwhelming Response. It was a plan that had been written, tested, revised, and perfected over the course of 60 years by 3 generations of humans who understood one truth that no other species in the galaxy had ever needed to learn. If you are small and surrounded by giants, you do not try to grow bigger. You make sure that when the giants finally step on you, your body is made of knives. The doctrine had 3 phases. Nari activated the first one now. For the past century, while the galaxy watched Earth's 40 sad little frigates fly in circles and laughed, humanity had been hiding things. Not on Earth, not even in the Sol system. Across 19 different star systems, spread over thousands of light years, human agents had planted devices. They were small, no bigger than a cargo container, and they were disguised as junk. Dead satellites, broken mining probes, decommissioned research drones, the kind of garbage that floated around every inhabited system and that nobody ever bothered to clean up. Each one of these devices was a gravity lens warhead. Nari had designed them herself. When activated, each one could create a localized singularity, a micro black hole that lasted exactly 4.7 seconds before collapsing. In those 4.7 seconds, everything within a 500-kilometer radius would be pulled in and crushed into nothing. No explosion, no flash, no sound. A hole in space where something used to be, and then not even that. There were over 300 of these devices scattered across the galaxy. The Concorde had no idea. The second phase was the fleet. Admiral Beijinu gave the order from a secure channel, and across the outer solar system, ships began to wake up. Not 40 ships, not 100. 1,200 warships, hidden for decades in asteroid fields, inside the atmospheres of gas giants, buried in the ice of frozen moons, and drifting in the deep black between planets where no one ever looked. These were not the rusty frigates the galaxy had seen. These were Spectre-class dreadnoughts, each one carrying weapons systems that the Concorde's own scientists had publicly declared impossible for any Tier 9 species to develop. Plasma lance arrays, adaptive hull armor that could shift its molecular structure in real time, engines that burned clean and silent, leaving no trail. The ships were black, angular, and ugly. They were not designed to impress. They were designed to kill. Jinnu watched on his display as the fleet powered up, 1,200 green dots appearing one by one on a map of the solar system, like stars being born. "All ships report ready," his aide said. Jinnu nodded. "Send them to Captain Doyu." On the bridge of the Vigil, Han Doyu received command of the fleet with the same expression he wore for everything, calm, steady, and slightly distant, like a man watching rain through a window. His crew moved around him with efficient urgency, but Doyu himself seemed unhurried. He had a way of making chaos feel slower, just by standing in the middle of it. He turned to his communications officer. Park Tae-ho was 26 years old, the youngest person on the bridge. He had joined the Navy because his grandfather had served in it, and his grandfather's father before that. 3 generations of men who had trained for a war they hoped would never come. Tae-ho had good hands and a steady voice, which was why he had been assigned to communications. He did not feel steady now. "Tae-ho," Doyu said. "Yes, Captain. I need you to prepare a broadcast, not to the Veshan fleet, not to the Concord, to everyone, every species, every system, every frequency. I want every living being in this galaxy to hear what I am about to say." Tae-ho swallowed. "Yes, Captain, ready when you are." Doyu was quiet for a moment. He looked at the main screen, which showed the Sol system from a distance. Earth was there, a tiny blue point surrounded by the dark shapes of Veshan warships. His home, burning, surrounded, 3 million dead. He began to speak. "To the Galactic Concord, and all who watched in silence. 130 years ago, you found us. You told us we were small. You told us we were primitive. You told us to kneel, and we knelt. You told us to smile, and we smiled. We did everything you asked. We broke no laws. We filed no complaints. We accepted every insult and every inspection and every closed door. We did this because we believed that patience would be rewarded, that fairness would come, that if we proved ourselves long enough, you would finally see us as equals." He paused. 3 days ago, you sent 300 warships to our home. You burned our cities. You killed 3 million of our people, children, families, people who had done nothing wrong except exist in a system you considered beneath you. And while our cities burned, you watched. Some of you cheered. Most of you did nothing. None of you helped. Another pause. The bridge was perfectly silent. "This is Earth's last act of diplomacy. We are not asking for fairness anymore. We are not filing petitions. We are not smiling. You struck first. You killed our children. You celebrated. So hear this, and hear it clearly. Every species, every world, every being that calls itself civilized." Doyu looked directly at Tae-ho. The young man's hands were shaking, but his fingers were on the controls, ready to send. "You just sealed your extinction." Tae-ho pressed the button. The message went out at the speed of light, amplified by hidden relay stations that humanity had placed across the galaxy over the past century. Within hours, it would reach every corner of known space. Every species would hear it. Every government would receive it. Every being with a radio, a screen, or an ear would know what Earth had said. Doyu turned back to the main screen. The blue dot of Earth was still there, still burning, still surrounded, but now, around it, 1,200 green dots were moving. Moving toward it. Moving fast. "Begin," Doyu said. The message hit the galaxy like a stone dropped into still water. It spread outward in every direction, carried by relay stations that no one knew existed, bouncing off satellites and through transit gates and into the receivers of billions of beings on thousands of worlds. Most of them heard it and did not believe it. Humans were Tier 9. Humans had 40 frigates. Humans were broken. The message was a bluff, a desperate scream from a dying species trying to sound dangerous one last time before it disappeared. Grohal, the Veshan fleet commander, heard it from his ship in Earth orbit. He played it for his officers. They laughed. One of them made a joke about humans and their emotions. Grohal smiled and shook his head and turned back to his command display. Then 14 of his ships vanished. There was no warning, no alarm, no incoming fire detected. One moment, 14 Veshan warships were holding formation in a standard orbital pattern. The next moment, they were gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Gone. The space where they had been was empty, and the ships on either side of them drifted slightly inward, as if the universe itself had closed a gap. Grohal stared at his display. The 14 dots that represented those ships had simply disappeared. No debris, no energy signature, no distress signal, nothing. Before he could speak, his sensor officer shouted a single word: "Contacts." The main screen filled with new signatures. They came from everywhere at once, from behind asteroids, from within the rings of Saturn, from the dark side of Jupiter, from deep pockets of empty space that should have been empty. 1,200 ships appearing like ghosts, like something that had been standing in the room the whole time and had only now chosen to be seen. Grohal's blood went cold. He had studied human military capability reports for years. 40 frigates, old engines, limited weapons. That was what the report said. That was what the Concorde's intelligence services had confirmed over and over for a century. 40 frigates. He was looking at 1,200 dreadnoughts. The Battle of Sol began at 0347 Earth Standard Time and lasted 6 hours and 11 minutes. It was not a battle in any real sense. It was a demonstration. The Spectre-class dreadnoughts moved through the Veshan formation like wolves through a herd of sheep. Their weapons were things the Concorde had never seen before. Plasma lances that cut through Veshan armor like paper. Gravity pulses that bent enemy ships until their hulls cracked open. Electronic warfare systems that turned Veshan targeting computers against their own fleet, making ships fire on each other in confusion. Han Doyu commanded the battle from the Vigil, with the calm of a man directing traffic. He gave orders in a quiet voice. He never raised it. His fleet moved with a coordination that spoke of decades of secret training, thousands of simulations, and a patience that bordered on obsession. Grohal tried to fight. He was a good commander, experienced and disciplined. But he had prepared for 40 frigates, and he had been given 1,200 nightmares instead. His ships fired back, and some of their shots landed, but for every human ship that took damage, 10 Veshan ships were already burning. The numbers were impossible. The technology gap was impossible. Everything was impossible, and yet it was happening. By the 4th hour, Grohal's fleet had been cut in half. By the 5th hour, he had less than 60 ships. He ordered a retreat. No one retreated. The human fleet had closed every exit point, surrounding the remaining Veshan ships in a sphere of black metal and silent engines. At the 6-hour mark, it was over. 286 Veshan warships destroyed. Grohal's command ship was the last to fall, torn apart by 3 simultaneous plasma lance strikes that left nothing but an expanding cloud of glowing dust. But Doyu and Jinnu did not stop. Within hours of the battle's end, Imhana transmitted her data. 11 years of intelligence work, compressed into a single encrypted package and sent from her hidden transmitter on the Concorde trade station. It contained everything. Every military base location, every supply line route, every command frequency, every weakness in the Concorde's defense network, every secret the galaxy's rulers thought was safe. The data arrived on Jinnu's screen. He read it in silence. Then he passed it to Nari. Across 5 Concorde systems, collapse protocol devices activated. A Veshan military starbase in the Korath system, home to 200 warships, disappeared in 4.7 seconds. A shipyard complex in the Dema Nebula, where the Concorde built its largest carriers, folded into a point of infinite density, and then into nothing. 3 moons orbiting the Veshan homeworld, each one housing weapons storage facilities, were erased so cleanly that the planet's tides shifted. The Concorde received the reports one after another, each one worse than the last. Panic spread through the council chambers. Moloch demanded answers, demanded counterattacks, demanded someone explain how a Tier 9 species had done this. His admirals had no answers. They had spent a century believing their own reports. They had never questioned them. They had never looked. While the military crumbled, Kosuji sat down in front of a camera in Geneva and began to broadcast. She did not threaten. She did not gloat. She simply read. She read from a document that was over 900 pages long, a record of every single injustice the Concorde had committed against humanity over 130 years. Every denied petition, every laughing dismissal, every inspection where Veshan officers had broken human equipment for amusement, every trade restriction designed to keep humans poor, every vote where other species had decided that humanity did not deserve basic rights. She read for 4 hours. Her voice never wavered. Her face never changed expression. She did not editorialize. She just read the facts one after another, in the same tone a person might use to read a grocery list. When she finished, she looked into the camera and said, "You had 130 years to treat us as equals. You chose not to. This is the consequence." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, governments scrambled to respond. 7 species quietly began deleting their voting records from the Concorde archives, erasing any evidence that they had voted against humanity's petitions. If Earth was going to hold the galaxy accountable, they did not want to be on the list. It was too late. On the trade station, Imhana smiled for the first time in 11 years. She had copied every voting record, every backroom deal, every private communication between Concorde members about humanity. She had copies of things that the Concorde's own archivists had tried to destroy. She had everything. She transmitted the records to Earth. Then she stood up, removed her false identity chip from behind her ear, and dropped it on the floor. Her work was done. But the war was not over. Across the galaxy, the remaining Concorde loyalists were gathering their fleets, pooling their ships, preparing for one last desperate push against the species they had underestimated for a century and a half. On the vigil, Park Taeho monitored the communications channels. He could hear them talking, the alien commanders, the Concorde admirals, the panicked politicians. They were afraid. He could hear it in their voices, in the way their words came too fast, in the way they repeated themselves. They were afraid, and they were angry, and they were coming. Taeho reported to Doyu. The captain listened, then nodded once. "Let them come," he said. 2 weeks after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. The Galactic Concorde, which had governed known space for 10,000 years, was falling apart. 12 species had formally withdrawn, sending quiet messages to Earth that said things like, "We always respected humanity, and we voted for your petitions," which were lies, and everyone knew they were lies. But nobody pointed that out, because the time for pointing things out had passed. 6 species sent secret envoys directly to Earth. They came in unmarked ships, alone, without guards, which was the diplomatic equivalent of crawling on their knees. They begged for mercy. They offered trade deals, technology exchanges, formal apologies. Admiral Bei Jinu received each of them in his office in Geneva, listened politely, thanked them for coming, and gave them nothing. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he wanted them to understand that mercy was not something they could buy. It was something that had to be earned, and earning it started with honesty. High Arbiter Moloch was not interested in mercy or honesty. He was interested in survival, his own survival, and the survival of the system that had kept him in power for 40 years. He spent those 2 weeks calling in every favor, every debt, every alliance he had built over his career. He rallied the remaining loyalists. 9 species agreed to fight. Together they assembled a combined fleet of 2,000 warships, the largest military force the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. It was everything they had. Moloch addressed the fleet personally. He told them that humanity was dangerous but still outnumbered. He told them that the collapse protocol devices could be found and disabled. He told them that if they struck fast and hard, they could end this before it went any further. He told them that the galaxy's future depended on them. That was the problem with Moloch. He had spent his entire life being right about everything, and he did not know how to be wrong. The Armada arrived at the edge of the Sol system on a clear Tuesday, because history seemed to like Tuesdays. 2,000 ships from 9 different species, arranged in a formation so vast that it blocked out the stars behind it. It was a wall of metal and light, stretching across millions of kilometers, and it was the most terrifying thing the galaxy had ever built. Admiral Bei Jinu stood on the bridge of the Vigil next to Han Doyu. The old man looked at the display showing the incoming fleet. 2,000 ships. His fleet had 1,200, and some of those were damaged from the Battle of Sol. "That is a lot of ships," Jinu said. "Yes," Doyu agreed. "I have been tired for 30 years, Jinu said. "Might as well finish this standing up." Doyu looked at him, and for the first time anyone could remember, almost smiled. "We will not need to fight them." "You are very confident for a man looking at 2,000 warships." "I am not confident," Doyu said. "I just know what Nari built." He gave one order: activate Door's final phase. The Horizon Array was the last secret. 200 collapse protocol devices, positioned in a perfect ring around the Sol system's Oort cloud, the vast shell of ice and rock that marked the boundary of humanity's home. They had been placed there over the course of 30 years, carried by unmanned drones, and left to float in the dark, like seeds waiting for spring. Nari activated them from beneath the Pacific Ocean. She pressed a single key on her console, and then stepped back, because even she was not entirely sure what would happen next. For 11 seconds, the universe around the Sol system changed. A wall of micro-singularities ignited in a perfect sphere, surrounding everything within the system. Every planet, every moon, every ship, every asteroid, in a barrier of compressed space-time that nothing could cross. For 11 seconds, the Sol system was cut off from the rest of the universe entirely. Nothing could get in. Nothing could get out. It was as if someone had drawn a circle around humanity's home and said, "This is ours, and you cannot touch it." Then it shut off. The singularities collapsed. The barrier vanished. Everything returned to normal. But the message was clear. Every sensor on every ship in the Armada had recorded what happened. Every scientist on every world would analyze the data and reach the same conclusion. Humanity could, at any time, seal their entire system behind an impenetrable wall. They could hide forever. Or they could turn the array outward and erase anything within range. The Armada floated in silence. 2,000 ships, 9 species, the greatest military force in galactic history, and not a single one moved. Then, slowly, one ship powered down its weapons, then another, then 10, then 100. Captains broke rank, turning their ships away from Sol, ignoring the screaming orders coming through their communications from Moloch's flagship. Some left because they were afraid. Some left because, for the first time in their lives, they felt something they had never felt toward humans before. Respect. Moloch raged. He demanded obedience. He threatened courts-martial, executions, the destruction of homeworlds. Nobody listened. His voice grew louder as his audience grew smaller, until he was shouting at empty channels. Kosuji opened a broadcast on every frequency. She spoke not to Moloch, but to every individual being on every ship in the armada. Her voice was calm and clear. The same voice that had spoken to the Concord Council all those months ago. Except now the galaxy was listening. "We do not want to rule you," she said. "We never did. We wanted to be heard. We wanted to be treated as equals. That is all we ever wanted. If you leave now, you leave in peace. If you stay and fight, you stay and die. This is not a threat. It is simply a fact." The armada dissolved. Ships scattered in every direction, jumping to faster than light speed as fast as their engines could carry them. Within an hour, the space around Sol was empty except for one ship. Molech's flagship. Alone, dark, and still. Park Tae-ho picked up a final transmission from the ship. It was not aimed at Earth. Molech was talking to his own people, to the Concord, to anyone who might still be listening. His voice was quiet now, all the authority drained out of it, leaving only the sound of a man who had just realized that everything he knew was wrong. "How did we not see this?" Moloch said. "Do you heard it?" He reached over to the communications console and opened a channel. He was not sure if Moloch could hear him. He spoke anyway. "Because you never looked." Moloch's ship turned and left. It was the last Concord vessel to ever enter the Sol system. Within a year, the Galactic Concord was formally dissolved. In its place, a new council was formed, one without tiers, without rankings, without the assumption that some species were born to rule and others to obey. Earth did not ask to lead it. Earth did not need to. The galaxy had learned. Yoon Nari dismantled the collapse protocol. She published every detail of the science, openly, freely, so that no single species could ever hold a monopoly on the technology. Some of her colleagues called her crazy. She told them that the only thing more dangerous than a weapon was a weapon that only one person controlled. Imhana came home. There was no ceremony waiting for her, no medals, no parade. She took a shuttle to Seoul, which had been rebuilt in the months since the attack, new buildings rising where the old ones had fallen. She walked through the streets until she found a small park near the river. She sat on a bench. She bought tteokbokki from a street cart, the spicy rice cakes she had not eaten in 11 years. She took one bite and started crying. She did not know why she was crying. She thought maybe it was because the tteokbokki tasted exactly the way she remembered, and after 11 years of pretending to be someone else, that small, familiar thing broke something open inside her that she had kept sealed shut for a very long time. Admiral Bae Jinu retired. A journalist asked him what he wanted to be remembered for. He thought about it for a while, longer than most people expected. Then he said, "Nothing. I want us to be so safe that no one needs to remember me." Han Do-yu stayed in command of the Vigil. He kept the ship stationed at the edge of the Sol system, watching the dark, the way a shepherd watches the tree line. Someone asked him once if he thought the galaxy would ever threaten Earth again. He said he did not know. He said that was why he stayed. Park Tae-ho was interviewed by a journalist 6 months after the war. She asked him what it had felt like to send Earth's message to the galaxy, the message that had changed everything. Tae-ho thought for a long time. He looked out the window at the sky, which was blue and clear and full of stars that no longer felt threatening. "It felt like finally exhaling," he said. And somewhere in the rebuilt streets of Seoul, a little girl asked her mother why there was a holiday today. Her mother knelt down and said, "Because a long time ago, some very patient people made sure that you would never have to be as patient as they were." The girl did not understand. But one day, she would. And that was enough.